Hello and welcome to another video. So today we're taking a look at a Dragoncraft deck. This is by no means an optimized deck, but surprisingly, even unoptimized, this deck is still a powerhouse. I think that's just Dragon for you. There isn't a lot that really contests it too hard. I would definitely want to put in a couple of Poseidons in this deck, probably replacing the Canyon of Dragons or something like that. I would also love to fit in the new Dragon Legendary, probably just replacing, Moon and Sun or True Dragon, something like that. Otherwise, this is just a pretty standard removal, aggressive Dragon deck. So 3 Zoe, 2 Irons, Frenzied, a really high top end. Canyon of Dragons I run just because it does put down constant threat, so if I can get it out, then it's usually pretty consistent. Otherwise, it's a very early ramp engine with plenty of removal options and just some extra healing and damage with things like Moon and Sun. So we're going to get right into it and check out how this deck performs. So our first matchup is against Sword. Sword is not exactly the strongest deck right now. It definitely seems to be lacking in something. What that something is, I'm not sure. We start off with a pretty solid hand, but don't really have a use for much outside of the Zoe. Has Zoe on 1 and Oracle on 2 are both nice plays, but everything else was kind of lackluster. I mean, Frenzied Drake and the other cards we actually drew to start with weren't the best way to start things off. So double Frenzied Drake, probably going to be our big win condition against Sword here. At least we can get a pretty early ramp going first. It definitely helps when playing Dragon that you go first, because your ramp just has that extra little pump to it, which is what you want. So a nice little Blazing Breath and a Pure Hearted Singer, so we can at least start to get some draws going, because we're going to need them at this point. We're really going to need that draw power. So there's Charlotta, not too big of a problem. We can just trade into it fairly easily. And then just use the spell card off the Dragonute. This deck doesn't unfortunately run enough real spells or amulets to take advantage of Lindworm, so it's definitely not something I'd recommend for this variant of the deck, but there are definitely plenty of Ramp Dragon variants and plenty of ways you can integrate Ramp into Dragon decks to begin with, so don't be too surprised with that being one of the more dominant decks, at least currently, as of making this video. So, starting off with the Dragonute is going to be good. We can at least deal with this board reasonably well. We're going to take out 2 followers guaranteed and deal 1 to another one, so I could not be much happier with that, honestly. That's a pretty nice thing to be able to do, limiting exactly what they can buff up and try and survive with. Unfortunately, Mars as a double is a really difficult card to deal with on 7, so that is going to be a fairly troublesome card for us to deal with. Definitely not one I'm going to enjoy having to slaughter here. But Amaterasu at least gives us a little bit of extra healing and can buy us a turn to get to our Irons on 8 thanks to this Evo effect, and then Frenzied Drake on 9, so it's really just a matter of us making the distance at this point. And since they do only have 1 more Evo, and it looks like they're going to be spending it on this frontline Cavalier, it does mean we should be pretty safe. We'll definitely see this frontline Cavalier rammed into the Amaterasu. I think that's pretty much guaranteed at this point. Everything else isn't a huge threat. And our Einstrahaka is going to have to kill Holy Bear, which is disappointing. I would have liked to have killed Mars with it, but I guess I'll accept my fate there. And since they don't have any Evos, the only thing that could protect them now would be a Mars play. So it's just a matter of, do they have it? If they are playing Bladed Hedgehog like that, they probably don't, and if they do, they're obviously waiting on it. And Charlotta, so no, definitely not a Mars play there. So this means our Frenzied Drake is going to dominate this turn very heavily. It's going to be hard for Sword to really come back off this. Dragonites are a good option. That does protect him a little bit, but we do have another Frenzied Drake. It is going to deal 6 damage, which keeps our first Frenzied Drake alive to go 7 to face. Couldn't ask for a much better lineup there. And actually, sorry, it was 5 damage because we actually lose 1 damage out for Moon and Sun. And the next game is against Rune. Rune just has so many variants at the moment, which makes it a fairly unpredictable deck. You can start to predict it after about turn 3 or 4, but it means that your mulligan is just going to be very random. You can only really mulligan into the best matchups, which usually depending on how I'm feeling at the time and what cards I draw, I usually try and mulligan against Giant Chimera Rune, because they use very similar principles as Burn Rune, so you can usually get around that. If it happens to be something like Abyss Rune, then you're going to struggle a little bit if you mulligan away some of your harder removal, but overall it's not too bad. So we start off with the Dragon Oracle. We already have one in hand, which is really good as well, so we're actually going to be able to Dragon Oracle again next turn. And even better, double Dragon Oracle. This is almost the epitome of the fastest way to completely ramp your deck up, putting us well and truly ahead of our opponent who went first. Pure Hearted Singer is a nice way to gain cards. And we can actually even afford to use an Evo. So I would have preferred Canyon of Dragons personally, but I mean, then they would have got the free Evo and would have been a not so fun time on the next turn, but this worked out pretty nicely. Obviously this looks to be a Giant Chimera Rune, as they are focusing on Spell Boost and Rooney, which is very common. I mean, once we saw that Rooney, it was pretty much guaranteed to be a Giant Chimera, but anything before that could easily have been Abyss Rune or Earth Rune or any variation of those sorts normally. So we get a pretty easy turn just to throw Canyon down, not too much of an issue for us. They're just going to go for their Insights by the look of it, which is pretty consistent there, so that's a little bit of a worry. Pretty comfortable Wind Blast. That's the only problem is Rune versus Dragon. Rune has a lot of removal cards, which can make this Dragon matchup fairly difficult for us. And since I don't need to ramp anymore, I can actually go for the Dragon Strife Blade, removing the follower and keeping our board fairly tough. I probably shouldn't have played the 1-3 there though. I should have kept one of them in my hand, just because it would have left a board slot free for Eyes Drahaka, and then I wouldn't have been in the situation I am right now, where I'm basically hoping that they can't kill me next turn. Which, turn 8, they're less likely to be able to kill me, because obviously they want to be killing me with a Giant Chimera. So we're going to get a huge chunk of damage. If they remove even one thing from this board, our Irons is going to be 8 damage, so they would have to kill pretty much everything here to have a chance. That, or somehow manage to burn me down, but doesn't look like they've got that kind of reach, which was pretty good in our favour there. So even with this Dragon deck being what I would class as severely unrefined, it's still an extremely solid deck. Even now, it just does really well, probably because the decks that I'm currently playing against aren't completely refined themselves. Portal can be a bit of a trickier matchup, but because you ramp so hard, usually you'll get well ahead of their curve and really put too many big threats down for them to deal with all at once, so that's not the worst matchup ever. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, hit the like button and subscribe. You'll find a link to the deck in the description below, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya.